Hi, my name is Julie Ann Link, and welcome to the Music Link. This week on the Let's Link project, I'd like to welcome Rodney Ackmann. Thank you so much for being here, Rod.
My pleasure.
So, to start out, Rod, could you share with us who you are and an overview of what you do as a professional musician?
Sure. I'm currently professor of bassoon at the University of Oklahoma. This marks my 10th year at OU, where I, of course, lead the bassoon studio and coach chamber music and lead our beloved Sooner bassooners in rehearsals and performances. And like any position in academia, there's a fair amount of committee work and guidance of the master's students and the DMA students. And that's my full-time responsibility, what brought me to Oklahoma. And in addition to that, I serve as principal bassoonist of the Oklahoma City Philharmonic Orchestra. And that's a for-service orchestra that's actually quite active and performing, let's see, 9 classics concerts and 6 pops and lots of other things, ballet and youth concerts and some runouts. So it's a pretty full schedule, which occupies many of my evenings and weekends, very happily, I should say. I enjoy that mix. And I'm also fortunate to be involved with chamber music here in the Oklahoma City area. Our local group is Bright Music Chamber Ensemble, and I usually play with them a few times each year. Various works, sometimes mixed strings and winds, or we just finished Poulenc Sextet in August and Beethoven Piano Quintet, things like that, and sometimes more adventurous music. It's a nice mix that somehow we fit into the calendar with the other things. And finally, I might add that for the past 14 years or so, I also perform in the summers at the Assisi Music Festival in Italy. And that's a 2-week festival in early July. And similarly, it's primarily chamber music, but what a great opportunity to make chamber music in Italy and enjoy all the wonderful things that it has to offer with history and architecture and the people and, of course, food. It's
Yeah.
kind of hot.
Yum, sounds really exciting, Rod. Could you tell us about where you grew up?
Sure. I'm a Midwesterner, and I grew up in the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri. And this is a few years back. I'm kind of a late baby boomer, I guess. And to put that in perspective, that means that there was a lot of growth during that era. And soldiers were coming back from World War II and establishing families and building homes, and neighborhoods were growing, and so were the schools. And so actually it was a very good time to be growing up in schools that were growing and adding positions and programs and things like that. And that extended, of course, into music, which I'm very grateful for now. Probably didn't realize it at the time, but we had very strong programs in our schools and probably across the country as well. When we think of today, a lot of the programs are being cut back, arts programs. It was quite the opposite during my youth. And so I'm very grateful to have had strong band programs. To put this in perspective, I think band started in 4th grade. That was pretty standard. Strings maybe a year earlier in 3rd grade. So we got a good early start and grew up again with schools bursting at the seams. And I recall, I think it was my sophomore year, our high school had grown so much. It was the largest high school in the state of Missouri, that they had to institute what was called split sessions. And so half the student body went to school at 6 in the morning and got off at 12:30, and the other half came in at noon and went to about 6:30 in the evening. Of course, the sophomore, I was a sophomore, they went the late shift. So, and everything in the middle were activities. So music and marching band and sports and everything. So a little unconventional, but that's what they had to do until a new high school could be built. So again, a lot of growth. And I think along with that, some really high quality music programs. And I'm very grateful for that.
Rod, so how did you get introduced to the bassoon?
Sure. Well, I think like many of us, it was through that school band program. And as a 4th grader, I'm not sure I knew much about the bassoon, but and probably too small so to play it. So I started as a clarinet player. I think that's fairly typical. and was happy in band and enjoying all that. And then again, like many, when you get to the middle school, or they called junior high at that time, seventh grade, my band director, approached me and approached the entire class. We're looking for someone to play the oboe, the bassoon. And I always kind of had it in the back of my mind, maybe I'd be happier playing something that was a little bit different than sitting in a large section of clarinets or trumpets or flutes or something. So it kind of appealed to me. And I thought about it, came home, talked to my mom and dad, and they said, sure, if you want to do this, go ahead. So I came back the next day and he said, that's great. Here's a bassoon. It was, typically kind of an old broken down instrument. And he said, you need to get a reed. Here's a fingering chart. There's a practice room, and I'll see you in about 6 weeks. So that's how it started. But again, I think our teachers stress the importance, if possible, to try to get some private study early on in the game. This band director was very committed, dedicated, professional trombonist and that sort of thing, but didn't know a whole lot about bassoon. So I was fortunate that I was able to find a private teacher almost immediately, and even more fortunate that he lived right down the street from me. So this was an advanced high school bassoonist that kind of took me under his wing and got me started.
Wonderful, Rod. Could you share with us more about where you studied music and what the programs were like?
Sure. So, I grew through the high school program, and I'll just comment a little more on that. I was lucky because for some reason they found out about me, that here's this kid playing the bassoon, and we need a second bassoon in this community orchestra, that community orchestra. And my mom and dad were very supportive. And even before I could drive, they made sure that if those opportunities were there and I wanted to participate, they would get me there. So I was fortunate to get a lot of community orchestra experience outside my school setting. And that led to youth symphony opportunities in St. Louis at Powell Symphony Hall, and some pretty amazing pre-college experiences. And the more immersed I got, the more I loved it. And it just seemed like this is what I want to do. So to answer your question, at that point, I was looking at several places. And, again, at that point, usually at that stage of history, students were looking at 2 or 3 schools. Today, I think students look at half dozen, if not more. And anyway, so I had a couple schools I was interested in, and ended up being accepted and receiving a scholarship at Indiana University in Bloomington, where I was fortunate to study with Leonard Sharrow.
Could you share with us a bit more about your teachers, Rod, and the high school student and teacher, and yeah.
Sure. Well, yeah, this high school student was just great because I walked down the street to my lessons, and he actually kind of exposed me to reed making, what that was all about. And a little bit later, I was able to study with another bassoonist in one of those community orchestras I mentioned. And I studied with her a couple of years. Ina Schoenberg was her name. She was a freelance musician, played with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra as an extra, and a terrific teacher. And what was so unique about that is not only did I have the weekly lesson, but I also got to sit next to her in these community orchestras. So even those orchestra rehearsals were like a private lesson. And that was just the enormous opportunity for growth. And she was a terrific mentor and supportive in every way. On to Indiana, Leonard Sharrow, again, a legendary bassoonist, and really just rock solid with the orchestral repertoire and playing musically and phrasing, and so completely dedicated to the entire studio. What I didn't know when I arrived, that would coincide with his last 4 years at Indiana University before he moved to the Pittsburgh Symphony. So I caught him at the last part of his tenure at Indiana University. A few years later, returned to IU to pursue my master's degree. At that time, the faculty had changed. The school was, of course, very similar to when I left. But at that point, I studied with Sidney Rosenberg for my master's. And so all 4 of those teachers were, very influential in my training and who I am today, how I play, how I conceive things, and hopefully my teaching as well.
Rod, do any influences come to mind, particularly with each of your teachers, where, of how they influenced your playing or teaching?
Yeah, I think so. With Mr. Sharrow, again, he was very structured, and it was we knew exactly what he expected coming in and playing a Mildy etude or two, and probably some solo repertoire, often ends of lessons concluded with the orchestral excerpts, of which he was just such a master, and told so many great stories and vignettes of his years with the NBC Symphony and Toscanini, you know, legendary people in musical history, and also in Chicago Symphony with Fritz Reiner. So, you know, we got a lot of those stories that he shared with us. And we didn't do a whole lot of reed making at that point. I think he kind of expected us to figure it out on our own. And I had some background, but I recall one reed class during those 4 years. And then, you know, the bassoon studio was a tightly bonded group. We kind of went on the buddy system and helped each other and did those nerdy things that most bassoonists do. And that has, you know, having a reed party on Friday nights when the rest of the students are out at the movies or doing something else. But we learned from each other, contrasted to a fabulous experience in every way. He cared so deeply about his students. And then during my master's with Mr. Rosenberg, again, I should say, he insisted that we call him Sid. So that was a little hard to get used to at first. And it was always Mr. Sharrow, but Sidney Rosenberg wanted us called Sid. So we did. And he was much more detailed with reed making and watching and guiding us with that. He was the first one, I can say too, at Indiana University that established a reed room. This is some years ago. Seems ridiculous, but as an undergrad, I carried all my tools in a little tackle box and moved from the practice room to my dorm, and that was it. So Mr. Rosenberg established a reed room at the Indiana University, and again, had so much to offer with orchestral experience in his years with the Montreal Symphony, Israel Philharmonic, New York City Opera. And he really understood people. I think he, as a teacher, I take that away from him, what makes students motivated, how to motivate. And he had an economy of words. His words were always extremely well chosen and powerful. And I thrived in that environment. You know, I was a little older. I'd worked a couple of years in education and music education, and it was just the right fit. So both my undergrad and graduate years, while there were similarities being on the IU campus and the programs, quite different in approach, and just kind of fulfilled what I needed, I think, to enter the profession.
So, Rod, are there any tips or advice that you could share with us about the music industry that you've learned since working professionally?
Well, sure. You know, we do learn from experience, we hopefully. And I think number one, it's, you know, it has to be your calling. It has to be your passion. I think, again, the more I got involved, the more I couldn't even think about anything else that I really would make me happy and that I wanted to do. So along with that comes commitment. And I think that's huge. Commitment, dedication, perseverance. You know, it's not a predictable career path, and there are disappointments and some things along the way, but there are also phenomenal joys and exhilarating memories that I have. But I think it's being passionate about what you do, being willing to commit to the many hours of preparation and reed making and submersing yourself in anything that has to do with music, going to concerts, listening to recordings, studying scores. It's hard work. And I'm at the point now that, you know, I really consider myself a lifelong student. I don't think we ever stop growing or learning from each other, from, you know, just viewing these kind of things online and so many other opportunities that maybe weren't so plentiful 10, 20, 30 years ago. So yeah, I think it's a calling, flexibility, hard work.
Did you ever think about changing careers outside of music?
No, you know, when I was younger as a kid, like most everyone, you know, you think of maybe playing Major League Baseball or something that probably isn't going to happen. But no, again, once I kind of got hooked, once those high school years started adding up and the experiences got better and higher level, and my gosh, you're sitting in a community orchestra and you've got the principal trumpet of the St. Louis Symphony down the row from you as a ringer, you know, and hearing those magnificent sounds and rehearsing on Saturdays with Leonard Slatkin at Powell Symphony Hall. Those are just profound moments that I got in. I didn't want to turn back for anything. I can't imagine myself, even though I know there are many, many other very worthwhile professions. And music is great because we have both the performance side of it and teaching. And that's why I'm so incredibly fortunate to be able to do both at a high level in my current spot.
Could you tell us about your teaching career, Rod?
Well, sure. I mean, I think did some private teaching when I finished my degrees at Indiana University, and once I started my performance career, then I became affiliated with some local colleges as an adjunct teacher, and sometimes those kind of overlap, maybe 2 or 3 at the same time. This was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we're talking about the University of Tulsa and Rogers State College and Tulsa Community College, a junior college. And you know, years went on, and gained a lot of experience from that. And in time, was asked to teach at my alma mater during the summer sessions at Indiana University for 7 summers. So that was exhilarating, teaching the highest level students and performing in their faculty student summer festival orchestra was a real thrill, and building experience. And yeah, over many years. And it was more recently, although it's been 17 years now, where I entered academia full-time in a tenure track professorship, first at the University of Missouri, my home state, which was certainly a draw at that time. And really enjoyed those 7 years, just terrific students, building a program of great pride and having a real bassoon studio culture, and performing in the Missouri Quintet, which is a very, very hardworking group that's commissioned Maslanka quintets and recordings. And I was just fortunate to be plugged into that group and teach at the university 7 years. Then, of course, call came from University of Oklahoma, actually an announcement that the position was open. Would I be interested? And I was. So yeah, 7 years at Missouri. Now I'm entering my 10th year at University of Oklahoma. That's kind of the timeline.
Could you share with us about your teaching philosophies and more about your approach to teaching music and the bassoon?
Sure. Well, it's something I'm really fascinated with. And probably as the years go on, every year even more so, of the learning process, the teaching process. And there's hardly a lesson that goes by where I don't kind of reevaluate myself. Did I approach that student in the best way possible? Can I change something next time in anything, to introduce them different repertoire, problem solving skills, practice skills, or things like that. So it can offer a very reflective approach, which I think is healthy. But beyond that, it's meeting the student where they are. And I love that. So I have 11 majors this fall, and each one is coming to me from a different background. 4 freshmen, and all 4 freshmen have a different background. Some have had private studies, some have not had that opportunity, but they all have potential. And it's my job to see how to guide them and get them as far along as quickly as I can and still be extremely thorough. They all bring different personalities, of course. So each one of those students has a different curriculum, and it keeps me on my toes. Not only taking notes every week of what they're working on and what are the successes, what are the challenges, but just how can I be a better teacher every single week? And I just thrive on that. It's really invigorating.
Could you share with us about your orchestra career?
Well, I was fortunate. You know, it's a tricky thing, and all arts organizations have limited career potential, I guess, because we don't have enough orchestras to find spots for everyone coming out of music schools. We all know that's a fact. But maybe I had a good summer. After I finished my master's degree at Indiana, I kind of thought, this is it. It's time to fish or cut bait. I've got a lot of training here, and I'm ready. I desperately want to sit in a symphony orchestra. And there were a lot of auditions auditions happening that particular summer. So I built up quite a bit of audition experience prior to that, but ended up over one weekend auditioning for the Omaha Symphony principal bassoon chair, as well as the very next day in the Tulsa Philharmonic. So back-to-back auditions. I won on Saturday, the Omaha job, went down to Tulsa and was offered that position. So kind of in a enviable catbird seat. Now you get to choose. And, you know, it's like looking in a crystal ball. They were comparable orchestras, both principal chairs. And so I just had to sleep on it and give some thought. One was a little northern, one was a little more southern, so cold climate, those kind of things. But I ended up choosing to accept the offer in the Tulsa Philharmonic. The second year, that position became full-time. They were expanding the core orchestra, and it grew into a nice about 40-piece chamber, full-time chamber orchestra, supplemented with other guaranteed service musicians for the larger things. Those were 22 years of my life that I played as principal bassoon in Tulsa, and such a great experience. Again, playing all the standard repertoire, being a section of 2 contract players and a part-time contra player means I played everything, there was no assistant principal. So every single note of classics, pops, chamber orchestra, chamber ensemble, woodwind quintet was part of the job, ballet, opera. It was a comprehensive exposure for me, a young professional musician, to gain all that experience. And we're kept so busy, the years just kind of rolled on one after another. And I realized after a while, boy, I've played Figaro 3 or 4 times now. I've played Bohème, you know, the major, not every piece, of course, but it gave me a good foundation. So that's where it started, 22 years. Sadly, the orchestra had its ups and downs, like many organizations, and they folded in after those years. So that's what kind of led me to some other career opportunities. And after going back to teaching actually in the classroom for 2 years, where I taught general elementary music, whole nother adventure that I look back on and treasure those 2 years for different reasons. Then the opportunity to get into higher education happened, Missouri 7 years, and then coming to Oklahoma with the potential, 2 separate employers, the university and the Philharmonic are 2 different, the Oklahoma City Philharmonic, 2 different employers, 2 different processes to go through a search at a university and an audition, 2 separate things. And it was kind of a leap of faith. Will this work for me? And they both worked out. So that's what makes me so incredibly satisfied now to be able to teach full-time and play in a high quality orchestra at the same time. I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit disjunct, but here I am in 22 plus 10, 32 years of principal bassooning.
Wonderful, Rod. I loved hearing about your Omaha and Tulsa auditions, you know, winning those back to back. Are there any other memorable auditions that come to mind, or even an interview?
Well, yeah, I mean, they all kind of leave a stamp on you, and you
Yes.
learn and grow from them. I'll go back to the Omaha, Tulsa. That's after, you know, an audition, maybe 2 in Pittsburgh and Columbus and
Wow.
Fort Wayne and San Diego. And I mean, they kind of go on and on. And if you're fortunate enough to be advanced into the semifinals, that gives you such an incredible boost of confidence. So that started happening. I figured they must like something about what I'm doing. I must be on the right track. Keep making reads and working hard, and maybe my day will come. But to answer your question, yeah, they all kind of stand out for different reasons. We could go on all night about that. But the thing with the Omaha Tulsa was, you know, I'm a college student with limited resources, had been married a couple of years, so I'm trying to do my part. My wife's kind of putting me through grad school, working hard at a restaurant in Bloomington and all that. So we tried to save money. So there we go, get in our 1978 Toyota Corolla to drive from Bloomington all the way to Omaha, unair conditioned. And, you know, it worked for us. And then down to Tulsa. I remember another long, just to save money, you know, to save our pennies. So maybe I could take another audition from Bloomington to Minneapolis. And so, you know, you do what you have to do. But I guess to answer your question, they all kind of, I was growing through the process. And I haven't taken, you know, more auditions than anybody else, but quite a few, couple dozen, I guess. But and as I continue to do it, I think I was seeing a pattern and maybe I was doing some things right.
I love hearing these stories, Rod.
I will tell you one more. This is kind of a funny one.
Sure.
This is the San Diego audition. This is when Judith LeClaire left the San Diego Symphony to join the New York Philharmonic. The job opens up, has massive appeal for everyone, of course. Who wouldn't want to live and work in San Diego? And so, you know, I'd save my pennies, and that one I couldn't drive from Bloomington. So got on a plane, flew out to San Diego. I'm sure I looked very Midwestern, probably a bright colored shirt and tennis shoes and stuff, and bassoon on my back, and optimistic, maybe this is my time. And again, trying to save money, had a hotel booked and all that, and everything lining up. I kind of had a structure and process to how to do these things. But in order to save money from getting from the airport to my hotel, I decided instead of getting a cab, that can be costly, let me just use city transit. I'll get on a city bus. It was a Friday night, got on the bus. I didn't know the bus routes. I thought I did. Maybe this is going to head up north, I think is what it was. Anyway, it did not. That bus started heading south to Tijuana, Mexico. And this was a Friday night, and a lot of people got on that bus after just being paid their week's wages. And I don't know, they were heading to Mexico and I felt like I wasn't in the right place. I better get off this bus and hail a cab as fast as I can. So I was trying to save money and almost backfired on me and ended up in Mexico. So I got in the cab, got to my hotel, calmed down, got a good night's sleep, took the audition, advanced in the semis, and that's where that left me. But anyway, that's something not to do. I learned from that experience. Don't try to save every penny just to, anyway, so.
Yeah, it's like finding that balance of doing what you know, and then also, yeah, just new places and and learning and going with the flow.
Exactly.
So, Rod, could you share with us any tips about coping with music performance anxiety, if that's something that you've experienced?
Well, I haven't that much. I mean, it's not that there isn't adrenaline every night and you sit on
Mhm.
stage and, our profession invites self-doubt. But I try to counter that with being prepared and working as hard as I can and never coming into rehearsal where I haven't done my level best to have those notes under the fingers, to know that the piece, if I haven't played it, I certainly need to study it. And we have every resource available with YouTube recordings and scores and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's still butterflies, but they're controlled, and there's more of an eagerness to deliver and really try to stay focused. So much of I think is here. Fortunately, I've never suffered any like performance injuries or carpal tunnel or anything like that. I guess I'm just lucky, but I do take preparation quite seriously, and you do your very best. I can cite a couple occasions. I've had the good fortune of performing at several IDRS conferences, 5 or 6. 2 of those, I was invited for an evening gala performance. So that's kind of high profile stuff. And I was deeply grateful to get that opportunity, took it very seriously. But you can imagine, as you're thinking, the most educated, experienced bassoonist artists from all over the world are sitting in front of you, hundreds. And that can really mess with you if you give that too much thought. But at the same time, I thought, I was invited to do this. They must have some confidence in me. I prepared the Persichetti Parable. I prepared David Canfield's sonata that I played up in Lawrence a few years ago. And what I can tell you is knowing all that, this critical audience, people that know their stuff, the minute I walked on stage, I felt such a warmth in their reception, the immediacy of the applause. There was something about it that reached me and put me at ease and told me inside that there's nobody that other than these people that want me to succeed. They want to hear a good performance. So in those 2 occasions, I could have been crazy, anxious and all that kind of stuff. Just the opposite happened. I felt a warmth surrounding me there. So anyway, a couple little vignettes there.
Could you share with us a little bit about your reed making style and any techniques?
Well, I don't have any magic or any secret words. Again, I just do a lot of it. I think that's number one. You got to make a lot of reeds, and we are still dealing with the plant material, no matter how much consistency I can get in my process and equipment, which we're blessed to have lots of great reed making equipment these days. But I think there's safety in numbers. So I make a lot of blanks and a lot of reeds and try to get my average up pretty high. And I think it's getting higher. I'm just within the last 15 years or so, that's quite a while, but I do tube cane. So I process everything and can control everything. Cane splitting and how the many wonderful ideas about finding the right part of that tube for the best possible piece of cane, pre-gouging, gouging, all that stuff is kind of controlled by how my equipment is set up. And I'm very fortunate to have people far smarter than me with machinery and understanding adjust and calibrate my equipment, both my personal equipment and what we have at the university, which kind of mirrors the equipment that we use. So I think getting equipment, keeping it properly calibrated, maintained, and having someone that will listen to you say, what do you want? How thick do you like the back? How, what kind of a reed maker? And then they do their very best to get it in condition. So if a blade gets dull or it's not doing what it's supposed to do, then I stop and say, let's get some attention to this. But basically, stalk to vocal, tube to finished reed. I make a lot of them, and I'm not afraid to throw them out if they're not behaving. I keep a kind of a log of when I made the blank, what was the cane. I try to be as scientific as I can. And sometimes it gives you trends, sometimes it doesn't, because we're still obviously dealing with the plant material.
Are there any important skills learned through music that apply to everyday life that you could share with us?
Well, sure. Again, kind of the basics, you know, hard work, dedication, perseverance. Maybe another one, I mean, and I think musicians make extremely hireable, employable people in any profession because of those qualities. But the teamwork, that's a big one. Being able to communicate in a civil and in a professional manner, and taking deep breaths sometimes, because it's very personal sometimes. If you get a comment from a conductor, didn't like how you played a phrase or something, did not take that personally. Realize you are the person hired to meet their wishes and play the way they want to. And often we get a lot of freedom too, of course. The chamber music, that's kind of the height of personal interaction and being mutually respectful of each other. But I think if you take that, those kind of things we learn in music, whether, you know, it's a 13-year-old, 14-year-old in a marching band field, learning discipline and teamwork and getting up early in the morning and going for the betterment of the group rather than the selfless versus selfish. Those kind of life skills transfer to anything and make you happier, I think, as a person as you interact with people.
Is there any advice that you could share to musicians just starting out their music careers?
Oh gosh, have fun. Enjoy the ride. You know, go to as many concerts as you can. Almost every organization has some kind of a student rush policy for cheap tickets for kids that don't have a lot of them. I encourage that with our own students. Get together with friends and carpool down to hear an orchestra and go out and get some pizza and ice cream later. Make it an evening of it. Get out and absorb that. Listen to as much music as you can on the internet and YouTube. I mean, we always expand ourselves that way and grow from hearing other great examples of wonderful performers. And yeah, and enjoy the ride, because it just offers so much. And don't limit yourself to kinds of music. Don't get too caught up in, oh, I only like this or that, or I'm a specialist. I mean, all that's well and good, but try to be open-minded to all kinds of music and all kinds of musicians. And you know, listen to the opera singers, listen to pop singers on the radio or whatever, and try to, you know, at least enjoy what they're doing. If not, apply some of the things you like about their artistry into our own world. It's never ending. It's just so many ways to kind of be inspired and enriched by a broad world of music that we have.
Rod, is there anyone that you'd be interested to suggest to be interviewed next for this project?
Well, first, let me say, Julie, congratulations and a huge thank you from me and on behalf of the bassoon community, worldwide bassoon community, for what you've already done. You've brought in some extraordinary people, and I've had the privilege of watching many and listening and growing and learning from the people you've already brought in. So thank you for that. And you brought in some really great people. So it's hard to kind of expand on that list, but I do have a couple names that I might pass along. And if you haven't already interviewed them or approached them, I might suggest some people are good friends of mine. One is Dale Clark, who just recently retired from Arkansas State University and has a outstanding commercial reed making business with an international clientele. And he's been a good friend of mine. He grows cane in his backyard. He's got all the tools and hires a staff. And what started as kind of a one-person show has really expanded. So I think he's highly respected, and not only a fine bassoonist, but as a reed maker, I think he's very, very highly respected. He's one. Another one is a new friend of mine that I just kind of got to know the last couple, well, actually during the pandemic. And for some reason, I started finding some extra tools, kind of rebooting a lot of things that I do as a bassoonist, and came across some pretty good deals on some profilers that needed some attention. And so I came in contact with Eric Arbiter, recently retired associate principal bassoonist of the Houston Symphony, who is a whiz guy with anything mechanical. And so he's one of the ones that does a lot of calibration and adjusting on equipment. Not only is he a rich career as a professional bassoonist, he also has this innate quality as someone that works on equipment. I think he would offer an awful lot, both in performance and in his skills as a guru in adjusting, calibrating, reed making equipment. And finally, I have one more, if I might.
Sure.
I don't be too long-winded here. Longtime friend and highly respected bassoon technician, restorative artist, and that would be Paul Nordby in Indianapolis. Legendary career, having worked as an apprentice under James Lasley for many years, and now Paul has kind of taken over that. Not kind of, he is the guy that I have used, and Jim Lasley as well prior to that, to maintain my instruments. And I think he just has a wealth of knowledge with all things bassoon and repair and restorations. He restored the Heckel bassoon that I'm playing on now, and it's amazing what he did. So I think any or all of those three, if you haven't already approached him, would be phenomenal to add to your list.
Wonderful. Yes, I would love to reach out to Dale, Eric, and Paul. I haven't yet, so thank you, Rod.
Very welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to interview you, Rod. It's been wonderful to get a glimpse into your life and career as a professional musician, so thank you so much.
My great pleasure, Julie. Again, thank you for all you do. It's been a great pleasure.
For everyone tuning in, keep an eye out for 2 events held every week on the Music Link. Every Thursday, a new YouTube video launches, and every Sunday, Central Daylight Time, is a live Zoom group discussion session with a new guest every week that you can register for the Zoom link on the website. Check out Rod's live hosting discussion session coming up this Sunday, where he's sharing about the recruiting process as a professor of bassoon, his bassoon studio's plant nursery, more about the process of changing careers from music, the importance of flexibility in life and music, and so much more. Find out more about Rod and his work on the University of Oklahoma's website at ou.edu. Please like, comment, and share any questions or feedback in the section below, and we'd be happy to incorporate these in the live discussion. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell for notifications, which really helps keep the Music Link moving forward. The Music Link is a New Zealand-based resource for people around the world to share, learn, and connect through music. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video.